And I'm really excited because I'm interviewing somebody that I have been a fan of for quite some time. His name is Richard Gordon, and he's a surgeon and an author, and he's written several novels about quantum healing. And we're very excited to have him here on Psychic Viewpoint. I am an energy healer, so I've read his book, and he's got a new book out. I'm excited to hear about it. How are you, Richard?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, so I saw your video on your website, quantumtouch.com, where you went out on the streets of Santa Monica and did spontaneous healings on people who were in pain. And the results and responses from the people you worked on were amazing. How does quantum healing work?
Okay, let me just make a couple small corrections. First, I'm not a surgeon, I'm not a doctor, and I have not written any novels. I write what I call nonfiction, which is work on energy healing, energy medicine. Now, when I went out on the streets in Santa Monica and did the sessions, what I was doing was I was using breathing and body awareness exercises to raise my own vibration of energy, and then holding that energy around the places where people were complaining of pain or suffering or various kinds of problems. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about that video is I did not edit anybody out of it. The only people who were not appearing on the video were ones who specifically asked me not to videotape them. But everyone who allowed me to tape them was on the video, and we scored 100% on people having significant or profound pain relief or relief of whatever symptoms they had right there on the spot.
Well, it was very profound because many of them came into the interview with you having like a 7 to 8 out of a 1.10 range of pain, and by the end of working with you, it's like 0 to 3. Exactly. How does that work? Like, what did you do exactly? What did you change their energy? Did you merge your energy with theirs? What did you do to take that pain away?
Let's look at the basis of what quantum touch is, and then I'll talk about what I did during the session. The basis of quantum touch understands that when two things vibrate at different frequencies, through a process called resonance and entrainment, they're going to try to match their frequencies together. Either the low frequency comes up to match the high one comes down to match the low one, or they're going to meet in the middle. What the quantum touch practitioner does is they use a combination of breathing and body awareness exercises to lift their own vibration. This first provides self-healing on the person doing the exercises. After that, then typically in the basic quantum touch work, you put your hands on the part of the body where the person is suffering, and you'll feel all this energy exchange between your hands and them. In the advanced quantum touch, which is what my new book is about, called Quantum Touch 2.0, The New Human, Discovering and Becoming, we outline a whole series of new human abilities we didn't know we had. And that's what I was demonstrating on the street, was I wasn't even touching these people. I was just meditating for typically 2 to 4 minutes and watching their symptoms just melt away. So there's ways of projecting our love. I call it focused and amplified love. We're learning how to focus our love in a very clear kind of way, amplify it and project it toward a specific outcome. Now, the basic method of using the breathing and body awareness precedes that more advanced technique. So that's why we really encourage people to learn the basic quantum touch before going on to the advanced.
Wonderful. And Richard, there's one of our regular listeners, Margaret, had a question that she wanted me to pass on to you. So before I forget, I wanted to squeeze it in. Her question is, has Richard Gordon ever read The Art of True Healing by Israel Regardie? If so, then what is his opinions of the methods of healing taught therein?
I remember reading it like 30 or 40 years ago or something. I don't remember very much about it. I just remembered that it wasn't specific enough to let me really do things that I thought were very powerful at the time. Maybe if I went back to it now, I'd see it from a whole different light, but it was too long ago for me to remember it clearly at this time.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So Can anyone learn to heal themselves and others, or do you have to be born with this gift? There's something special that you have to have, or is this something that anyone can learn to do?
You know, I've made my whole career around the idea that this is a basic human skill and that anybody can learn it. This is truly something everybody can learn. Now, when I was on the road 3 to 4 weeks out of the month, giving 4 to 6 lectures a week, I would say during the lectures, kind of like the guy that sells the cheap suits, I'd say, I'll guarantee that you'll be able to realign a person's hips with a light touch before lunch break on the first day, or you'll get your money back. And no one ever got a refund because everybody was able to do it. These are truly basic human abilities that have been lost or forgotten. And what's really lovely about it is that they blend with every other modality I'm aware of. So if you are a Reiki master or Qigong or whatever you do, you can find a way of integrating these techniques in with what you do. I like to think of it as a modality without a big ego, because it doesn't say only me. It says, yes, let's all work together. Let's do what we know to be true and then find out what's most effective.
And is this something you could do on animals?
Oh, yeah. One woman worked on hundreds of horses. We've got a little video of her somewhere online, and she was talking about how, like clockwork, when she works on the horses go to sleep. Yet within minutes. And I said, well, how do you know they're sleeping? She says, well, their eyes drop and their jaw drops and their head drops. And she's kind of, acting it all out while she's talking. She's really charming. And she says, yeah, the horses go to sleep when you work on them. She says, over time, when the horses understand what you're doing, they'll actually turn their bodies and say, oh, no, over here. No, work over here. And they'll keep moving themselves around to get your hands in the right place so that you can give them sessions. And we've had so many people doing amazing work on animals. Now, you mentioned working on yourself. And working on yourself for many people is a bit more challenging. And as I've said many times, it tends to be not quite as fast, easy, fun, or powerful. And I said that in one of my classes a couple years ago, and I just heard this loud groan from the room. And all these people started objecting, said, well, that's not true for me. I don't have any trouble working on myself. And I thought, okay, I don't want to be projecting my own limitations on you. So for many people, it's not as fast, easy, fun, or powerful. But for many other people, it's very, very fluid. And, it's something that you can do on yourself. But generally speaking, if you were to find the perfect gift and gift wrap it and wait for the perfect moment and then give it to yourself, it just doesn't have that surprise factor, does it? But if you found that perfect gift, if somebody gives it to you, wow, it has a real surprise to you personally. And that's how it is when you're receiving somebody else's energy. It's a surprise to the system. And the system responds to it and goes, oh, I know what to do with this energy. Once the energy is provided, then the body's own intelligence takes over, the spiritual intelligence of the system, and it directs the healing to the areas and places that it's really needed most. And that's how it works. So this life force energy that they call chi or ki or prana or mana, all these different words in different cultures used for this energy, we use various techniques to focus, amplify it, provide it, then their body intelligence utilizes it appropriately for them. So you see things that you just never expected. Like in one class, a woman was complaining that her neck hurt a whole lot. Somebody ran energy into her neck, and then she reported, oh, well, my hearing came back. I said, what, was it gone long? She said, well, not since I was, she's in her 50s. She said as a teenager, she was hit by a drunk driver and hadn't heard out her left ear, in all those years. And you never know what's going to happen, but the intelligence of the system directs the energy to where it needs to go.
And Richard, have you ever worked with children before? And is it different at all when you work with children?
Well, yes and no. I mean, children tend to, what's different is they tend to respond more quickly. They tend to respond really fast to the work. And also, they love it when they learn it. I remember this one little boy, Zach, from Seattle. What a delightful kid he was. He was so excited when he learned to do the work. And he said to his best friend, he said, you know, I learned to help heal people. And his friend said, well, heal me. He said, well, okay, what do you got wrong? He says, well, nothing. He said, well, you know, unless you got some pain or something, I can't help you. So the kid takes his own hand, slams it on the table as hard as he can. His hand's turning purple. Zach picks up the boy's hand, runs energy, and we use that. You use that word for moving the energy, running energy into the boy's hand. And a minute or two later, the kid's opening and closing his hand, saying, "Wow, that's so cool," because the kids respond to it really well because they want to learn real magic. They watched Harry Potter. It takes years and years to convince a child that magic isn't real, and we're showing them that it actually is.
Yeah, I guess Harry Potter has done a lot of good, hasn't he, in that area?
Well, I think what happens is a certain segment of the population got really frightened because if you used the magic word, then it's against their religion or something, and the other people just thought it was a fantasy story. So we haven't really had a lot of bleed over from people saying, oh my God, this is magic. This is incredible. I love this. We haven't had that much of people coming over, but I think in the long run, when people realize that their love is actually magic, that their love can do miracles, that's when things will change. Right now, we're kind of in that in-between place where a small segment of the population, yes, we've got certified practitioners in 50 countries and my books in 17 languages and all that kind of stuff, but there's only a small portion of the population that is tapped into using this. We've got over 1,000 certified practitioners around the world doing it. Although we have a very wide footprint, we don't have a very deep one yet because most people have not discovered that they can do this stuff. And when they do discover it, holy smokes, that's when they find out how totally amazing it is.
And I've worked with kids for 30 years teaching dance, and I often, they get injured here or there, and I've done healing work on them, of course, without saying anything because, as you know, sometimes you have to be careful. And I find them to be so receptive. To me, it almost feels like they're a sponge. Like, yeah. I feel like I have to turn the energy off, and sometimes because I feel like they're so receptive, they just keep pulling more and more and more because they don't have that shell or that barrier around them that we develop, throughout our lifetime, where we start shutting people off and shutting other people's energy out of fear and out of, just being damaged and wounded.
My friend Terry up in Seattle, he was working with, his wife is a social worker, and the judge let her take home a baby that had been was born 13 weeks premature with severe fetal alcohol syndrome and addicted to amphetamines. He said, the institution isn't going to do as good a job as you. Why don't you take care of him? That child was given quantum touch every single day and good food. The child grew up with above average intelligence, with average height and weight. That child then learned how to see and perceive energy, and he could see it in his hands, and he became like the social leader of the entire kindergarten, where everybody adored this little kid, while the prognosis was for a 20 to 40 IQ and to be institutionalized for life. Wow. That was a big one. Terry then started doing demonstrations of the work, and he went in front of a group of people, and a child had severe bowed legs, and she was kind of crying because she couldn't step over this cord in the room, separating a couple places, and the people in the room started crying because they saw her legs come back together, and then she could step over the cord and run across the room for the first time in her life. The possibilities of what this means are so vast, and people think it's about this quality of the work. Oh, it's for burns. Oh, it's for bowed legs. Oh, it's for adjusting pelvic structure. Or it's, I just interviewed a couple of my instructors a couple months ago. I have a new podcast called The Possible Human. And in this one podcast with Deborah Gare and Tyler Odysseus, they're telling me about a wide range of severe mental disorders that are responding really well to the energy. I'm just shocked. I didn't know we could do that. They're saying, oh yeah, this guy had been hospitalized for bipolar a number of times. Really? Yeah, how many sessions did you give? Oh, 3 or 4 sessions. He kept getting better. And what other things? And they're talking about Parkinson's, addictions, traumas, Alzheimer's, ADHD, just severe issues where people have been going through very, very difficult stuff. And I'm asked, well, what did you do? And they said, we just did what you taught us. And I didn't know. You see, my focus hasn't been to be the practitioner. Mine has been more to be the researcher, the person who discovers things, tests them out long enough to know there's something totally amazing going on, and then pass it on to other people while I go discover something else. So I have been dumbfounded and astounded. I kind of like that English word gobsmacked, to find out, what do you mean it did this too? So these are some of the things that I'm learning about and finding out that we really do have abilities way beyond anything I had known previously.
So, Richard, when you say you send energy to the part of the body that's like wounded or in pain, is it just kind of sending it to that area? Or are you actually working with meridians, chakras, auras, or anything like that? Or you just send the energy and allow the body to direct it where it needs to go?
We're using a very complicated method called the where does it hurt technique.
Okay.
and when a person identifies a place that hurts or is injured or upset in some way, on the basic level, we put our hands over it and we use a lot of breathing work. In fact, if you wouldn't mind, at some point on the call, I'd like to give everybody a technique that you can start doing, to be doing a very primitive form of quantum touch immediately that you can keep and use forever and start getting some results from it. And then later, if you like, you can learn more and learn to become far more powerful. But this is a good starting method. In the advanced work, what happens is I learn how to focus in on the heart chakra and work with the heart chakra with the breathing and body awareness exercises and project that. And we found out we can get results about 3 to 5 times faster by combining the basic quantum touch with this heart chakra work that we call level 2 quantum touch, or the new human. So these are new skills that we have, that the small story is we're able to do this kind of healing work and accelerate healing on a profound level. That's the small story. The big story is we're able to demonstrate in a clinical setting that consciousness affects matter, that the materialism that science has been addicted to and refusing to consider anything outside that box for the last 400 years, we can show a demonstration without special equipment to show that our love actually has a physical impact on the outer reality. And the physicists call that action at a distance, and they don't believe that action at a distance is possible, but we can demonstrate it now.
Yeah, I would love for you to teach us that technique now. That would be great.
Okay, so what I'm going to show you is a basic method. If you love it, learn more, because you can, if you want to, you can learn a whole lot more and become far more powerful. But this is kind of like almost like a cheat to get it started. I'll explain that a little later. What you do, if you're not driving and operating heavy equipment and all that, when you're listening to this, is rub your hands together very quickly for about 15 seconds. Just that kind of thing. We just rub them together. Then place your hands over, sandwich the part of the body of the person you're wanting to work on, and breathe deeply into your hands. Feel as much sensation in your hands as you can while you breathe deeply through your hands, as if you're breathing through all the skin on your hands. And then repeat the rubbing of your hands together every 2 minutes or so. Now, that's kind of an artificial way of running the energy. In the basic quantum touch, we learn to sweep the energy through our entire body and to do it without having to be mechanical about it. But this mechanical method, you can leave your hands in place for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, hour and a quarter, and you will get real, genuine healing results that you can see and test for yourself that are profound, just using this method. Another adjunct to it is, if the pain moves to a different part of their body, go there too. Chase it. You want to chase the pain from point A to point B to point C. As you chase that pain, you'll see it being relieved all over the system. So you rub your hands together, you can deep breathing the whole time. So a simple breath would be 4 counts in, 4 counts out. So a count is about a second. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. Keep the breathing going the whole time. Put your love in your hands. That is an extremely elementary way for you to start doing healing now. And if you love it and you start getting great results, I encourage you to learn more, because you will be able to do extraordinary work when you learn how to amplify and project the energy.
And so, Richard, when you say breathe through the hands, you mean visualize the breath moving in and out of the hands as it moves in and out of the lungs?
I would say feel as if the breath was coming out of the hands. You don't have to visualize. Just feel as if the hands were breathing while you're breathing. You don't have to think about the fact that it's coming through your lungs. Just feel like you're breathing through your hands. It's another way of keeping your attention in your hands, and that's what we're doing. I'm having you focus all your awareness in your hands and feel like you have your love in your hands. If you do these things and breathe deeply throughout the whole time, you will be moving enough energy. And rub your hands together every 2 minutes or so, because rubbing the hands is a way of bringing awareness to the hands. Now, this is a shortcut, kind of like, putting training wheels on a bicycle or something. It isn't going to let you go super fast, but it will get you going down the road, and you will be able to start doing some really amazing healing work just from this little 2-minute technique.
And Richard, are you able to use this technique or other techniques that you teach to do long distance healing if the person isn't very close to you? Are you able to, do it to somebody that's maybe in a different country or different state?
Yeah, love knows no limit, does it? I mean, can you love somebody in another country? Can you love somebody at a distance? Of course you can. And so the energy of the love is a non-physical energy. And it can go anywhere. It's not limited by time or space. And so the distant healing works amazingly well. And one of the demonstrations that I'm really enjoying showing off, because it works really right about 100% of the time, and it's considered physiologically impossible, is untwisting a person's hips and occipital ridge, the back of their head. Chiropractors know there's something called pelvic torsion. And pelvic torsion often accounts for a certain percentage of a person's back pain and tension. And everybody has anywhere from a very minor to a very major pelvic torsion. I think I've seen maybe 2 or 3 people in all these years who didn't have any pelvic torsion. And when you find a person whose hips are twisted, what it looks like, typically, when you measure them from the front, and you put your hands on top of the hip bones, your right hand looks high. And when you go behind them and measure them again, your right hand looks high. Because the left hip is twisted so it looks high in the front, and the right is twisted so it looks high in the back. And then the occipital ridge usually looks high on the right-hand side. When I meditate for about 5 seconds and do it on the sphenoid bone, which is behind the nose and eyes, that's when you see the whole person come untwisting completely. And it seems, from the last 4 or 5 years I've been doing this, to be a permanent shift in them. So that's a completely remarkable demonstration that consciousness affects matter. And you can do it from across the room, or I can do it over Skype. So the person could be in Hong Kong, and I can just meditate, and right there it happens, right before your eyes. When I actually gave a keynote address at the University of Hong Kong, I demonstrated how I could untwist the pelvic torsion of a stage full of people simultaneously. And the founding director of the behavioral science department wrote that this is probably the most important new publication in the world, speaking of my new book, because it redefines what it means to be a human being and shows us a whole set of new human abilities that we didn't know we had.
And so I'm assuming that this would also apply to group healing, like working with large groups of people, or does it need to be one-on-one?
No, it can be whatever you can imagine.
Okay.
So we're really seeing that because science has been so limited by the assumption that the mind is inside the brain, that matter is unconscious and purposeless, that energy healing and alternative medicine can't be real and can't exist, they've allocated virtually no money to study such things. Even the studies of alternative medicine have been for the most unimportant aspects of the field, by and large, and very little has gotten done, because if they were to accept that this was real, it would change the very foundations of what they've assumed to be true. I've been in communication with Rupert Sheldrake recently, and he, I think, is probably the most important scientist of our time. And he's written a really brilliant book called Science Set Free, where he really shows how scientists got locked into this materialistic philosophy, what he calls scientism, where the belief, it's almost like a set of beliefs that people pick up through some kind of educational osmosis, where they tend to become these skeptics and cynics when it comes to ideas that don't fit them. And what's exciting is to really open the door and say, oh my God, look, there is a whole world here for us to discover. I was at a conference about 3 years ago called Towards the Science of Consciousness. And I had a sign that said, quantum theory is incomplete, free demo. And some guy comes up to me and he says, all right, what do you got? And I said, well, I'm going to demonstrate that I can untwist your hips without touching you. He said, well, that's impossible. I said, great, hold that thought. And I measured him and said, wow, your hips are further out of alignment than maybe almost anybody I've ever seen in my life. So I said, okay, lock your hips and make it hard for me. So he does, and 5 seconds later I measure him and said, look, you're completely aligned now. He said, well, of course, you used reverse psychology on me. And I said, reverse psychology? I said, well, do you consider yourself an empirical scientist or faith-based? He said, well, empirical scientist, of course. Well, great, then why don't you watch me do this 5 or 10 more times and see if I'm using reverse psychology. And then he said, you know, if I let myself believe this just happened, everything I know about science would fall like a house of cards. Well, as an empirical scientist, I replied, don't you want to let the cards fall where they will? And he thought about it for a moment and he said, not today. And he just walked away. Because the fundamental things that people will see when they discover these human abilities undermine the core assumptions that we're separate, that this is not a spiritual reality, that love has no impact, that matter is unconscious, that the mind is confined to the brain, that the only things that are real are physical things, the physicality of life. But what if the physicality of life was just a shadow of our consciousness? What if all this was just a projection of reality? What if love was the only thing that was actually real and everything else was the shadow of that? Well, that's a little too radical for them to consider yet.
Well, and unfortunately, love can't be marketed and sold too. So as long as we're attracted to money, which we are, that creates an obstacle. But I'm so grateful to people like you, because I do believe that this is where we're headed. In my readings, I notice more and more of the younger people that I'm reading are getting into holistic medicine and more natural, you know, even some scientists that I've read for, they're looking more toward natural ways of healing the body. So I do feel like this is the way that we're headed, and people like you have really opened up the door for it. what I'm curious what you feel when you're actually doing healing on another person. For me, I get really high because the love goes both ways. It has to pass through me in order for it to go into the next person. So I'm just curious what you feel when you do it.
Yeah, I think you've described it really well. You can get hot and you can get high and you can feel really overwhelming gratitude and stuff like that. The thing to do when somebody selects a practitioner, the best question you can ask is, how do you feel after a long day of working on many people? If their answer is, I'm totally exhausted, but I feel grateful that I sacrificed for the well-being of the world, blah, blah, run away. That's not the practitioner to see. The one who says, oh my God, I have so much energy, I have a hard time going to sleep, that's the one to go see and make your appointment at the end of the day. Because a good practitioner gets more energized every single session they give. They have more energy, more gratitude, and more fun. And the poor practitioner gets drained and tired. And so when you interview people who practice a wide range of modalities, some of them will tell you that, yeah, it's a natural consequence to become tired or drained as a result of giving a long session to somebody or a number of people, or that person was so wiped out I became drained working on them. And that's even a Hollywood myth that you see. There's a number of movies that come to mind that where the quote healer, we don't like that word very much, becomes tired or drained from and almost sacrifices their life at times just to help another person. We like to think that the definition of a healer is someone who is sick and got well. And a great healer is someone who is very sick and got well quickly. Because ultimately, all healing is self-healing. And what we're doing is holding the field of vibration to allow them to heal themselves more quickly.
I really appreciate that. That's an excellent point, because I agree with you that I tell people, when people tell me that they get tired, I'm like, something's not right. You know, you're not supposed to get tired, because I actually, when I am feeling tired just in life, I'm like, I need to do an energy healing. I need to connect with another human being on a deeper level. You know, this superficial stuff is driving me crazy. So I appreciate you differentiating the two, because I agree with you. I think that if you're getting tired, something isn't right, because it is supposed to charge both of you. We're going to take a very quick 1-minute break, and we will be back with Richard Gordon.
A new era in psychic services has begun. PsychicAccess.com. You can connect with our psychic advisors by telephone or chat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All of our psychic advisors are interviewed, fully verified, and accuracy tested, assuring you quality service. We're living in some very troubled times right now. More and more, the world's problems are affecting us on a personal level. You don't have to deal with this alone. Our highly accurate psychics, caring advisors, and talented mediums can help with situations you are currently experiencing and can let you know what the future may hold for you. All new customers get a free 6-minute reading. All you have to do is register. Why not visit us now and get a free reading at PsychicAccess.com.
And we're back with Richard Gordon, and we were talking about how some people get tired when they do healing work, and we both agree that there's something amiss there. Is there something you can suggest for people who do healing work and they do feel like it drains them or they get tired? You know, can you help me also to tell you know, people what they might be doing incorrectly, or what they could do differently to make it more of an easier, better experience for them?
Yeah. The quantum touch practitioner does not ever become tired from the sessions, because what we're doing is we're using that combination of the breathing and body awareness exercises to raise their own vibration and create that high energy field. And then the room has to entrain to the practitioner. I remember one woman was telling me she works at a place where everybody's depressed all the time, sort of like a DMV or something. And so before she got cranky herself and became kind of depressive being there, she just started doing the breathing and body awareness exercises and did a distant healing on the entire office space and just lifted up the energy of joy and projected it into the whole office. And then she started hearing the most bizarre conversations. Like one woman was saying, well, I don't know why I'm in such a good mood today. Nothing good has happened. And, complaining about how good she was feeling. What happens is when you learn to impeccably hold the energy, which is just the basis of quantum touch, then you can hold that energy very effectively, and other people will match you. That way, if you walk into a courtroom or a bureaucratic nightmare place and you want to lift your energy so you don't match the energy of the people, you can just do that breathing body awareness stuff and you'll become the dominant vibration. You know how it is when you walk into a party and you just start feeling happier because everybody's there to feel happy, and it just kind of tends to bring you up with it. Or you walk into a courthouse or a bureaucratic place and you start feeling terrible because so many people have been feeling bad there for so long that it tends to bring you down too. That's the entrainment. But we don't have to let that happen when you know how to run the energy. You can lift that energy really high and let that move you.
Do you find that it's more difficult to work with someone who's depressed or maybe very angry or fearful, or does it not make any difference?
It really doesn't matter. In fact, if you happen to be in any of those states, doing the session will help heal you of those conditions just from doing quantum touch as well. So I remember one time some really bad things had happened. I was very depressed and I had like 8 hours of sessions to give that day. And during one of the sessions, I was holding this woman's head who had been in a whole series of car accidents. And I was just touching her neck lightly. And I was sitting behind her and I had my forehead resting on the top of the table. And then I suddenly noticed I had gone to sleep for about 6 or 8 minutes. I had ended up taking a nap, but I was still doing the breathing and I was still moving the energy through my body really intensely. When she got off the table, she said, "Oh my God, that was the best session I ever got." I really got out of the way in that one. But the truth is that you can continue running the energy. And many times I would wake up and I was doing the breathing and the sweeping in my dream. And I was running the energy in my sleep. So running energy is just a term I use for the combination of the breathing and body awareness exercises. So if you don't know what that means, that's where it comes from.
And I love the title of your new book, The New Human. What is the new human?
Well, when you realize that you can project your love and amplify it and send it anywhere, when, that these are whole sets of new abilities. So I found out, for example, that like I said, I could work 3 to 5 times faster without even touching people, regardless of distance. That I could work on multiple conditions simultaneously, multiple people simultaneously. And one of the ways I figured this out was I tried to, because I'm really kind of the empirical scientist myself, I like to do tests on things that I can actually see whether I got a definitive result or not. So I was using untwisting the front of the hips, the back of the hips, and the occipital ridge as a way to see if I could do this. So I tried to hold all 3 of those thoughts in my head simultaneously. Front of the hips, back of the hips, occipital ridge, and it was an utter failure. I could not hold all 3 thoughts at once. Then I came up with an idea. I drew a little sketch, call it an icon or a little image. And I gave myself the intent that this meant the front of the hips, the back of the hips, and the occipital ridge all at the same time. And I studied it with the intent that that's what the meaning of it was. So I gave a meaning to my little icon. Then I measured a friend and looked off in a different direction and saw the icon in the middle of the air, just visualizing it there with my eyes open, and started projecting the energy into the icon without thinking about his hips and occipital ridge. In a few seconds, he said, "Oh my God, everything moved inside me." And I measured him, and it all come into alignment. Because you can take an idea, which I'll call an icon, an image that represents an idea, and you can move the energy into the idea and have that have impact. This is real magic. This is, they call it a sigil in the old magic books. Now we call it an icon. Microsoft Word has a W, and sometimes it's blue, and sometimes it's green, and sometimes it's red, but it doesn't really matter, because when you press the W, you get the program coming in. Similarly, you can create icons for things that you desire. We have people using this work for manifestation of things they want in their life. And a woman in Hawaii, just incredible manifestations of the house, the perfect house that she wanted, and is with 50 qualities and one she hadn't even thought of too on top of it. By the way, that particular woman, Kim, did some incredible work on preemies, some premature babies, but babies born with real bad lung problems, where they had severe breathing problems, and she'd work on them for a few minutes, and the breathing problems would clear up. She worked with children with misshapen heads. And in one case, they said, well, the whole top of the head collapsed. It was under the rib of the mother, and we're going to have to do surgery to get the cranial bones in the right position. While they were prepping everything, she had close to an hour with the baby, and she was holding the baby, running energy into the baby's head. The baby's head completely corrected, and they didn't need to do the surgery. We really don't know the limits of what's possible. We sincerely don't know this at all. This is an issue that means that we get to redefine what we are. And I think that the truth is that we are spiritual beings. We've identified with our humanness. And the more we understand that our love is really valuable, it has tremendous impact. It truly matters. And when you think about it, you realize all the people who have hurt you in your life gave you the exact opposite message. They let you know that your love wasn't valuable. It didn't matter how much you loved or how much you cared or what you wanted to do. It had no impact. It wasn't good enough. The people who hurt us most always give us that martyred message that your love didn't matter, didn't have impact, and wasn't valuable. And what we're seeing from this work is that your love is the most valuable thing in the world. It has tremendous impact, even if you don't believe it. You don't need to believe in this stuff. As I had said years ago, you don't need to believe in the ocean to get wet. You just got to jump in. And that's what the case is. You just try it, and you discover, oh my God, this actually worked. And then you go further and further down this delightful rabbit hole where you discover that we really do have these abilities.
Well, I love this phrase about the babies. That makes me emotional. It makes me so happy that people are using this technique on children, since I have such deep, strong feelings for children. Richard, one of my co-hosts would like to ask you a question. Stephen, did you have a question for Richard?
I did, actually. It's slightly off topic, or kind of going back to our original topic, but I got a question. I'm a rookie, and I'm wondering if there's any relationship between the temperature of my hands and my ability to do things with my energy, like heal people or even other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's consider the question. Can you love somebody if your hands are cold?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the answer. So some people say, well, can I do this work with my shoes on? Well, can you love somebody when you're wearing shoes? Yes. And you see, we've gotten so nervous, like, oh, if the conditions aren't perfectly right, I don't have the perfect room and I don't have the perfect candle, maybe I can't do this stuff. And the answer is, this is robust. because we are made of the fabric of love. That's what we are. We're these incredible beings of love here, rediscovering who we really are. And it works all the time. Now, there are times that this healing doesn't work. I'm just saying the ability to move the energy works all the time. How the person receives it may not be 100%. So we see something like 8 or 10% of the time we're not going to make much progress on a condition. And by the way, I like to tell the truth. I don't want to exaggerate anything or undersell anything. And sometimes you're not going to see good results. And when that happens, we like to use a different technique, and I call it self-created health. And this is something that took me 30 years to figure out. Back in 1980, I woke up with severe flu symptoms, a deep gurgling chest cough, severe fever, terrible headache, bones aching. I just felt terrible. And I thought I was going to be sick for at least a week. But I crawled out of bed since I had just attended a workshop a couple days before. And in the workshop, the teacher was suggesting that health conditions have an emotional basis and probably suppressed anger in one form or another. So I looked to see what I was upset about, and I couldn't find anything. I looked at my childhood, and the weird thing was, I was so emotionally numb, I couldn't feel any emotion. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me that a friend had said something intentionally humiliating in front of my friends, and as soon as I was aware of it, wow, my emotions flooded in on me. I could get angry, and I could cry, and I could feel it, and I could vent. So I let myself vent for about 10 minutes, just the intensity of those emotions. I was feeling a little better, so I got up and took a shower, drove downtown Santa Cruz, where I lived at the time, sat in the sun, drank a cup of coffee, and halfway through the cup, I go, oh my God, I was sick this morning. And all the flu symptoms were completely gone. Within about 3 years, I figured out a series of questions, interrogative questions to ask people, and we could pretty much nail down the emotional cause of a condition. But then it took me another 27 years to put together the rest of the system. And the rest of the system had those first 2 steps, the discovery of what the emotional cause was. The second step, of course, is the release. It has to be that. The third step is the dangerous one. The third step is the one that gets people in big trouble because they try to take responsibility. I know I'm doing this to myself. I'm responsible for my own illness. And then that gets all the criticism from people. How dare you blame the victim for being sick and blah, blah. And they get really mean and nasty about that particular idea. That's only the third step. That's not the first or second step. And you see people beating themselves up forever. Well, I know I did this to myself, and I just feel so bad that, and they just keep beating them. It's an endless cycle. The third step is the insight that you had done it to yourself, which immediately needs to be transferred into remorse that you had hurt yourself. And now the bow, like a bow and arrow, has been pulled back all the way, and we're ready for self-forgiveness. And the self-forgiveness method that I came up with is so powerful, it leads to explosive self-love, uncontainable self-love, more than you've ever experienced before, which I call spiritual self-love, where you realize that you're so grateful for having had the condition because it showed how you had stopped loving. So I remember one woman had severe sciatic pain, and she couldn't sleep at night. She would cry herself to sleep because the pain in her down her leg was so severe from the sciatica. And I used about 8 or 10 minutes of quantum touch, expecting it to be all she needed. It didn't do anything for her at all. And like I say, 8% of the time or something, you're going to hit a wall, or you'll only see temporary benefit. And in her case, I helped her figure out what this extremely painful emotion was, and to give her some techniques on processing. She's slept fine ever since and hasn't had any more sciatic problem. Because when you get to that emotional core level and can release those emotions, that's where the real healing and empowerment comes in. Because ultimately, there are some things we can do with energy, and when you can't do them with energy, that's when we look for the emotional causes. So we've got a whole program for people interested in that particular thing. We even have about 35 instructors teaching it around the world, teaching people how to find release and work with the emotional causes.
Well, that was a great question, Stephen. I'm sure a lot of people thought of that. I've thought of that myself, how it affects, because my hands tend to run cold. So I'm glad you asked that question. I'm sure many people are thinking about that. And then I have another host, Maureen, who would also like to ask you a question, Richard. Maureen?
Good.
Well, I know there's not a lot of time, but I wanted to let you know that there is a new pioneer of people as my daughter who is going to Columbia that is now, she's in neuroscience, but bringing in the spirituality and how meditation and everything, that we are crossing over in a really great time right now. People are finally getting it with the science and the spirituality, and I hope, if you're aware of this, it's a really great time that we're in.
It really is, but, in my correspondence with Rupert Sheldrake, he's pretty discouraged because the mindset of the scientists is still toward materialism. And what I want to do is I want to support Rupert, because I have some discoveries that validate about 60% of the ideas that he's been putting out. And the scientists who study meditation and spirituality are generally, not always, still thinking it's a physical epiphenomena that's coming from the electrochemical reaction of the brain, and they see it from that point of view, not that we have a higher self, God got us all that is, infinite intelligence, and so forth. Not from that point of view, but from an epiphenomenal process of the electrochemical reactions in the brain. And as long as people see it from that physical point of view, they limit the kinds of questions that they can ask and the kinds of things that they can see. There's been some research showing a presponse where when people see photographs of either very disturbing images like auto accidents or very loving images of the mother holding the child's hand or something, they don't know. The computer is deciding a millisecond before the image is shown, but their brain is responding through the EEG a second or 3 seconds before the image is shown, that there's a wave from the future that's breaking upon the present constantly. And other scientists have been finding it. Some of the scientists I've found out about have been afraid to publish this information. And somebody else recently published some new information, I haven't read the article yet, but about how the future impacts the present. Now, this will be the biggest revolution in science in 400 years for people to realize that the spiritual metaphysical is real, and that we can build our science around an understanding of that and not simply dismiss it because it's inconvenient towards the things that they know or want to believe are true.
Well, thank you, Richard, very much. I appreciate that very much. And the interview. Thank you.
Let's get your daughter a copy of the book, because I think when they start testing brainwaves and other things with this energy, we're going to see some remarkable things.
Right. I will do that. Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Richard, this has just been a wonderful interview. I have been an admirer of yours for a very long time, and I'm so grateful for you to come by, and I just want to thank you again.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure. It's a real delight to be here.
Hello, my name is Res Miranda. If you're having relationship, career, or life issues, I'm inviting you to experience what it's like to have access to professional, highly accurate psychics and spiritual advisors you can trust to care and help you. Register now to get your free 6-minute reading by telephone or chat. Get answers, get access, psychic access, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. PsychicAccess.com.
Really enjoy.